Anna was tired of waiting. Her dreams felt distant, and the struggles of daily life only deepened her impatience. On the verge of leaving everything behind, an unexpected encounter with Elias, the village potter, completely transformed her perspective. Among clay, a spinning wheel, and a kiln, Anna discovered that her life, much like a vase, was being carefully shaped. But would she have the patience to let the potter finish his work? Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stick with us until the end, this story might surprise you more than you expect. The small village of Clearstone seemed frozen in time. Its gray stone houses and narrow streets bore witness to generations who lived simply, almost always untouched by big changes. But for Anna, each day there felt like an unbearable weight. At 22 years old, Anna felt trapped in an endless cycle of monotony. Since her mother fell ill, she had to abandon her studies and devote herself to working at the local market. Nothing had gone as planned. Money was tight, her dream of becoming a teacher was shelved, and her impatience grew with every morning she woke up in the same place, without a hint of change. That afternoon, sitting by the stream that ran through the village, Anna stared at her reflection in the water, a lump in her throat. She held a small suitcase by her side, the symbol of a decision she had made weeks ago, to leave. "I deserve more than this," she repeated to herself. She loved her family, but the routine, the hardships, and the silence of the village were suffocating her dreams. As she pondered the farewell she planned for nightfall, she heard footsteps on the trail behind her. Elias, the potter, was carrying a heavy sack of clay. He was a simple man of few words, but his talented hands turned ordinary clay into vases so beautiful that people from neighboring villages sought them out. "Running away from something, Anna?" he asked calmly, stopping beside her. She flinched, startled. "Running away? No. She hesitated. Elias observed her for a moment before setting the sack on the ground. "Sometimes what seems like running away is just impatience in disguise. Why don't you come with me to the workshop? Maybe I can show you something that'll help you understand what you're looking for." Anna looked at him skeptically. What could a potter possibly know about her problems? But out of curiosity, or perhaps out of fear of leaving so abruptly, she agreed. She picked up her suitcase and followed Elias along the trail to his small wooden workshop atop the hill. Crossing the threshold of the workshop, Anna was struck by the smell of wet clay and the rhythmic sound of the spinning wheel. Elias pointed to a shapeless lump of clay and said with an enigmatic smile, "It all starts here, Anna. But what matters is how it ends. Are you ready to see the process?" Elias's workshop was simple yet full of life. The aged wooden walls held shelves lined with vases of all shapes and sizes. Some were painted in vibrant colors, others adorned with delicate patterns, and still others remained in the natural shade of clay. Each piece seemed to tell a story, as if the potter had shaped not only the material but also emotions and meanings into them. Anna looked around with curiosity, but also with a sense of impatience. What does he want to show me? And will it actually help? She wondered as Elias cleaned the wooden wheel. "Sit there, Anna," he said, pointing to a stool near the wheel. "I'm going to show you something, but you'll need patience." She rolled her eyes but complied, crossing her arms as Elias placed a lump of clay on the spinning wheel. He pressed the pedal, and the wheel began to turn slowly. "This is just a lump of clay," he began, running his hands over the damp material. "Shapeless, purposeless. But in the right hands, it can become something beautiful, useful, and enduring." Anna raised an eyebrow. "And what does that have to do with me?" Elias smiled, unfazed by her impatience. Have you ever watched a vase being made? No? Then pay attention. Carefully, Elias began pressing the clay, his hands firm yet gentle, guiding the material as it spun on the wheel. He pushed, pulled, and pressed, shaping it into a form that still seemed undefined. This clay, Anna, is like life. It only takes shape after being worked, stretched, and pressed. But there can't be any rush. If I push too hard, it breaks. If I stop working, it never takes form. Anna sighed, shaking her head. That's nice, Elias, but it doesn't solve my life. I'm tired of waiting. I've waited for years, and nothing ever changes. Elias stopped the wheel and looked at her seriously. You think nothing's happening, Anna, because you can't see what God is doing behind the scenes. But the clay doesn't see what the potter is doing either. It only feels the hands shaping it. Have you ever considered that your impatience might be cracking the work he's trying to do in you? His words hit her like a gust of wind. She looked away, biting her lip. Maybe, she whispered. But it still feels like it's never going to work out. Elias resumed shaping the vase, this time crafting a more defined form. Then watch, he said. If you trust the process, you'll see how even a shapeless lump of clay can become something beautiful. Anna sat in silence, watching as Elias continued to mold the vase. His hands moved as if they were dancing. Then suddenly, he stopped and looked at her. Tomorrow, I want you to see what happens when the vase faces the fire. Maybe then you'll understand why time is so important. The next morning, Anna returned to Elias's workshop, curious yet hesitant. The sky was gray, and the wind carried the scent of wet earth, as if even the weather mirrored the restlessness she felt inside. Elias was already there, standing by the kiln that warmed the workshop. On a nearby table rested the vase he had shaped the night before, dry but dull. Anna stared at it for a moment, fascinated by its simplicity. Is this it? She asked, breaking the silence. Elias smiled. It's not ready yet. Without fire, it's just a lump of dry clay. A single touch could crumble it. He carefully picked up the vase, turning it in his hands. Before it got to this point, this clay went through a process. It was harvested, sifted, and mixed with water. Only then did it become pliable enough to be shaped. If we had skipped any of those steps, the result would have been completely different. Anna frowned. You mean, before the vase was even shaped, the clay had to be prepared? Elias nodded. Exactly. Just like us. Sometimes, the challenges we face aren't the end, they're just the beginning. God is preparing our hearts before He begins to shape us. Anna crossed her arms. Then why does it feel like nothing ever changes? I've been through so much, and I still feel lost, shapeless, like this clay. Elias placed the vase back on the table and looked at Anna with a serious expression. Because you're trying to shape yourself before you're ready. The clay doesn't shape itself. It needs the potter's touch. His words made Anna swallow hard. She had never thought about life this way. It was as if she'd been trying to do everything on her own, without letting God work in her. But how do I know if I'm ready? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elias walked to a shelf and picked up a cracked vase, holding it out for her to see. Do you see this? This vase was shaped before the clay was prepared. It looked beautiful at first, but when it went into the kiln, it cracked. It couldn't withstand the fire because it didn't have the patience to go through the process. Anna took the cracked vase, running her fingers over its rough edges. The image resonated deeply within her, as though her own soul bore similar fractures. Elias stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Now, I want you to see what happens when fire meets a prepared vase. Maybe that will answer the question you don't yet know how to ask. Are you ready to continue?" Elias lit the kiln, and the heat began to fill the workshop. The crackling flames contrasted with the contemplative silence between him and Anna. She watched as Elias prepared the vase he had shaped the day before, handling it with care, almost as if it were something alive. "Before placing the vase in the kiln, I have to make sure it's completely dry," Elias explained. "If there's still moisture or if the vase hasn't been properly shaped, the fire will destroy it." Anna leaned in, intrigued. "So you check every detail before putting it in the fire?" Elias nodded. The potter knows his work. He understands the strength of the fire and the resilience of the clay. Just as God knows our limitations and never lets us face anything we're not ready for. Those words struck Anna like a cold wind. It was as if Elias were speaking directly about her life. Was she trying to run from her struggles because she didn't believe she could endure them? "And what if you make a mistake?" Anna asked, her voice tinged with doubt. "What if the vase isn't ready and you don't realize it?" Elias smiled, picking up a small, dry piece of clay from another shelf. "The mistake isn't in the clay, but in the hands that shape it. And God's hands never make mistakes, Anna. He knows exactly what he's doing." He placed the vase in the kiln with almost ceremonial precision. The intense heat made Anna take a step back, but Elias stayed close, watching intently. "The fire isn't punishment," he continued. "It's a necessary step. Without the kiln, the vase doesn't gain strength, it doesn't become durable. It can never fulfill the purpose it was created for." Anna furrowed her brow, struggling to grasp the concept. "But fire hurts. Hardships, they hurt. It's not fair." Elias nodded thoughtfully. "That's true, it does hurt. But the pain is temporary. What remains afterward is strength, resilience. You want to avoid the fire because you think you're alone in it. But the truth, Anna, is that the potter never abandons the vase in the kiln. He's always nearby, watching." Elias's words stirred something in Anna, a faint pang of emotion. How many times had she felt alone, as if God had abandoned her in the midst of her struggles? Yet here, standing before the kiln, the image of a potter tending carefully to every detail began to shift her perspective. "So, the fire is necessary?" Anna murmured, more to herself than to Elias. "More than necessary," he replied. "The fire is what gives the vase its true essence. Without it, the vase is just dry clay, vulnerable to every touch. With the fire, it becomes strong and useful." As Elias spoke, the sound of the crackling flames seemed to resonate in Anna's heart. She looked at the kiln, and for the first time, she didn't feel fear, she felt a glimmer of hope. Elias stepped closer and said, "Tomorrow, you'll see the finished vase. But before that, I want to ask you something. If you're the vase, who is the potter in your life?" The day dawned with a clear sky, and as Anna walked back to Elias's workshop, she caught the scent of fresh bread wafting from the village homes. Something inside her felt different. The restlessness she had carried for so long was beginning to give way to a quiet curiosity. What would happen to the vase after the fire? And what could that mean for her? When she arrived at the workshop, she found Elias already at work on the wheel. He was shaping another vase, his hands submerged in the damp clay. The kiln was off, but its residual warmth still lingered in the air. "Good morning, Anna," he said without looking up from his work. "Are you ready to see the result?" She nodded, feeling a bit nervous. Elias stood and walked to the kiln, carefully removing the vase. What had once been a lifeless lump of clay now gleamed with a smooth finish, its curves flawless, its structure solid. "Amazing, isn't it?" Elias said, handing the vase to Anna. "Go ahead, feel it." Anna took the vase, marveling at its firmness and weight. It felt entirely different from what it had been before entering the fire. "It's so strong, so perfect," she murmured. Elias smiled. "Not perfect, Anna. Just transformed. And it was the fire that did that." Anna looked at him, his words resonating deeply. But what if the vase couldn't withstand the fire? Elias picked up the cracked vase he had shown her the day before and placed it beside the finished one. That's what happens when the clay isn't prepared or when we try to rush the process. But a vase that allows itself to be shaped by the potter and trusts the right timing never fails. Anna stood in silence, reflecting on her own life. How many times had she tried to run from challenges, as if she could escape the fire? How often had she felt weak, as though she couldn't endure the heat of her trials? "Do you think that's what God is doing with me?" she asked hesitantly. Elias nodded. "I believe you're in the middle of the process. The struggles you're facing now are like the fire. You may feel like you're being consumed, but in truth, you're being strengthened." Anna held the finished vase, running her fingers over its smooth edges. For the first time in a long while, she felt something different, a flicker of hope. "So, I just need to trust the potter," she whispered, almost to herself. "Trust, Anna, and be patient," Elias replied. "The vase doesn't understand the process, but the potter knows the outcome." Elias turned to Anna, his eyes shining with wisdom. "But there's one final step before this vase is complete. Tomorrow, I'll show you the last stage. It's just as important as all the others. Are you ready for the next lesson?" When Anna arrived at the workshop the next day, she found Elias cleaning a cracked vase. The piece was painted in vibrant colors, but the crack running through its middle seemed irreparable. It was the same vase he had shown her before, but now, the contrast between its beauty and its fragility was even more striking. "This vase looked finished," Elias said as he placed the cracked piece on the table. "But it was shaped in haste. I didn't notice the tiny air bubbles in the clay, invisible to the naked eye. When it went into the kiln, the bubbles expanded, causing this crack." Anna leaned in, carefully running her fingers over the crack. "So no matter how beautiful it looks on the outside, it's still broken on the inside?" Elias nodded. "Exactly. That's what happens to us when we refuse to go through the full process. We may appear strong on the outside, but inside, cracks of pride, impatience, and self-reliance weaken us." Anna bit her lip, feeling exposed by Elias's words. He wasn't judging her, but it felt as though he were describing her life. How many times had she masked her impatience with a facade of confidence? How often had she tried to control everything, convinced she knew what was best for herself? "So what happens to this vase now? Can it be fixed?" she asked, looking at the potter. Elias smiled. "Not like before. It will never be as strong as it could have been. But that doesn't mean it's worthless. Just like God, the potter doesn't discard a vase because of its cracks. He finds a way to use it, even with its flaws." He picked up a fine brush and began applying a golden mixture to the crack. Anna watched in fascination as the bright gold filled the broken line, transforming the flaw into a beautiful, unique detail. "This is called kintsugi," Elias explained. "It's a Japanese technique for repairing broken ceramics, where the cracks are highlighted rather than hidden. It's a way of showing that the beauty of the vase lies in its story, in its scars." Anna held the vase as Elias finished, admiring the contrast between its fragility and the newfound strength the gold accent gave it. "You're saying my cracks can be used for something good?" "Not just can be, Anna. They will be, if you allow the potter to work in you. Your struggles, your pain, your failures, all of it is part of the masterpiece. God doesn't need perfection. He needs surrender." Anna felt her eyes welling up. For the first time, she saw her flaws in a new light, not as limitations, but as opportunities for growth and learning. Elias placed the golden vase in Anna's hands and looked her in the eyes. "Tomorrow, I'll show you how a vase shaped with patience can become a masterpiece. But first, I need you to answer one question. Are you ready to embrace the process, even with your cracks?" The sun was high when Anna returned to Elias's workshop the next day. With every step she took, she felt the weight of Elias's question echoing in her mind. Are you ready to accept the process, even with your cracks? Something felt different within her. Instead of running from her struggles, she found herself beginning to face them with new eyes. The anxiety was still there, but alongside it now was something stronger, hope. When she arrived, she found Elias sitting on the porch, reading a small, worn leather notebook. He closed it when he saw her and smiled. "Good morning, Anna. Are you ready for the final lesson?" She took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready." Elias led her into the workshop, where, on a table, rested the vase he had shaped and fired a few days earlier. But this time, it was adorned with intricate, hand-painted designs. Golden flowers decorated its surface, and its appearance was majestic. "This is the vase you saw being formed," Elias said. "It has gone through the process, it was shaped, fired in the kiln, and now it has been decorated. It is complete, ready to fulfill its purpose." Anna gazed at the work with wide, emotional eyes. The vase, which had begun as a shapeless lump of clay, was now a masterpiece. "It's beautiful, perfect," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "No, Anna. It's not perfect. Even this vase has tiny imperfections. But that doesn't make it any less useful or valuable." Anna looked at him, taking in his words. Elias noticed her thoughtful expression and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You know, Anna, for many years, I was just like you. Impatient, frustrated, wanting everything to happen on my own timeline. When I first became a potter, I ruined many vases because I refused to wait. It was only when I learned to trust the process that I began to create pieces like this one." He picked up the vase and held it before her. "But that only happened when I surrendered control to God. He taught me that I, too, am a vase in his hands." Anna felt tears well up in her eyes. For the first time, she realized that her resistance and impatience had been preventing God from shaping her life as the potter he is. "So, do you think my life can be transformed like this vase?" she asked hesitantly. "I don't think so, Anna. I know so. But that will only be possible if you surrender to the potter. Allow him to work in you, even if the process involves fire, trials, and time." Anna swallowed hard. The thought of letting go, of handing over her frustrations to God, felt both terrifying and freeing. Elias smiled and placed the finished vase in Anna's hands. "Now you have to decide, Anna, will you keep trying to shape your life on your own, or are you ready to trust the potter? The answer is in your hands. Anna stood silently, holding the vase in her hands as though it contained something precious and fragile. Elias's words resonated deeply in her heart. As she gazed at the vase, she saw more than shaped clay. She saw the journey it had undergone, the molding, the fire, the time, and finally, the finishing touches that had made it unique. I don't think I've ever thought about my life this way, Anna said, her voice barely a whisper. I always felt like I had to rush, like I needed to achieve everything quickly because time was running out. Elias picked up another vase from the shelf, smaller and simpler, yet still beautiful. He held it next to the ornate vase, as if to highlight the difference between the two. And this one? What do you think of it? He asked. Anna examined the piece. It's pretty too, but it feels unfinished. Elias smiled. That's because it was stopped before the process was complete. It didn't go through the kiln, nor did it receive its finishing touches. It's useful, but it's not as strong as it could have been. Too often, we settle for less than what God has for us because we're unwilling to endure the time needed to be shaped. Anna grew thoughtful. It felt as though Elias was describing her own life up to that point. She now realized that her hurry hadn't taken her further, instead, it had created invisible cracks, making her more vulnerable. So what do I do now? She asked, looking at Elias. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes filled with compassion. You surrender, Anna. Trust the potter. Allow him to work in your life. It won't be easy, and there will be moments when you'll feel like the clay in the fire. But remember, the potter never abandons the vase while it's being transformed. His words touched something deep within her. Anna felt as if a weight was being lifted from her shoulders. For the first time, she realized she didn't have to have all the answers or control every aspect of her life. I want that, Elias. I want to be shaped by the potter. I want to learn to trust and wait. Elias nodded, smiling. That's the most important decision you could ever make. Anna placed the finished vase back on the table and looked at Elias with determination. But how do I start? How do I learn to trust the potter when the fire feels the hottest? Elias stepped back, opened a drawer, and handed her something with a mysterious smile. Tomorrow, we'll talk about that. But for now, take this with you and reflect on it. Anna opened the small package and found a piece of raw clay inside. What could it mean? The next morning, Anna woke up with the first rays of sunlight illuminating the piece of clay Elias had given her. She had placed it on her bedside table, and throughout the night, she had woken up several times, looking at it, as if the simple object held a secret yet to be revealed. Carrying the clay in her hand, Anna climbed the trail to the workshop. This time, her heart felt lighter, but it was also full of questions. When she arrived, she found Elias in the garden, sitting on a wooden bench, gazing at the distant mountains. Good morning, Anna, he greeted her, turning to her with a smile. Did you bring the clay? She held it out to him. Yes, but I don't understand what I'm supposed to do with it. Elias took the clay and studied it for a moment before handing it back to her. This piece represents your life, Anna. It has no shape, no purpose, no use on its own. But in the right hands, it can become something extraordinary. In the right hands, Anna repeated, starting to understand what he meant. Elias nodded. I want you to do something. When you get home today, take this clay and shape it with your own hands. It doesn't need to be perfect, but pour into it your emotions, your dreams, and your struggles. Tomorrow, bring it back, and we'll see what we can do together. Anna furrowed her brow, confused. Shape it? I've never done this before. What if I mess it up? Elias chuckled softly. You don't need to be perfect, Anna. Just try. God doesn't ask for perfection from us, only a willing heart. With that, Anna returned home and spent hours working with the clay in her hands. At first, her attempts were clumsy, but over time, she began to feel something special. Every curve she shaped seemed to carry a piece of her story, and when she finished, the simple vase she created felt more precious than anything she had ever made before. The next day, Anna returned to the workshop, where Elias was waiting with a warm smile. Show me what you made, he said. Anna handed him the vase, feeling a little shy. It's not as beautiful as yours. Elias held the vase carefully, as though it were a masterpiece. It doesn't need to be. It's a reflection of you, Anna. Now, we'll place it in the kiln and let the fire finish what your hands started. She watched as Elias placed the vase in the kiln. The heat was intense, and for a moment, Anna felt afraid. What if it cracks? She asked in a whisper. Elias looked at her with a calm expression. Then we'll start again. What matters is that you trust the process. As the vase endured the heat of the kiln, Anna felt an unexpected peace wash over her heart. For the first time, she wasn't anxious about the outcome. When the kiln was finally opened, Elias smiled, but before revealing the finished vase, he turned to Anna and asked, Anna, are you ready to see what the fire has done to your creation? The sound of the kiln opening seemed to echo in Anna's heart, each beat reverberating as if the vase inside carried more than shaped clay, it carried her story. Elias, with his usual patience, used a long tool to retrieve the piece from the heat. Anna watched nervously as the vase emerged from the flames. What had once been dull clay now had a subtle sheen, and its structure looked solid, resilient. She could hardly believe that this simple object, crafted with her own hands, had withstood the heat of the kiln. Here's your vase, Anna, Elias said, carefully handing it to her. She held it, awestruck. Every imperfect detail of its shape seemed to tell a part of her journey. The curves weren't flawless, but the shine and strength more than made up for any imperfections. I don't even know how this happened, Anna admitted, amazed. It seemed so fragile before. Elias smiled. The strength came from the fire. Not just the heat, but the time it spent inside. And most importantly, it was shaped with intention. Just like God does with us. Anna's eyes welled with tears. Her whole life, she had fought against the process, trying to rush things and often feeling inadequate. But here, holding this vase, she finally understood. So that's it? Trust, she asked. Trust and surrender, Elias replied. God isn't just shaping you, He's also strengthening you, preparing you to fulfill a purpose. But that takes patience, Anna. The vase doesn't choose the time or the heat, it simply trusts the potter's hands. She nodded, moved. For the first time, she felt a peace she had never known. She didn't need all the answers or control over everything in her life. God was in control, and that was enough. What do I do now? Anna asked, looking at Elias. Now, you live as the vase that has been transformed, he said. Let God keep working in you, even when the process feels difficult. And remember, just like this vase, you will also be a testimony to others. Anna looked at the vase in her hands, then back at Elias. But what if I break again? She asked, her voice a mixture of fear and hope. Elias smiled tenderly and replied. Then God will use the cracks to create something even more beautiful. The potter's hands never give up on his work. In the months that followed, Anna decided to stay in the village. She began working with Elias in the workshop, learning to shape vases while allowing her own life to be shaped. The process wasn't easy, there were days of doubt and frustration, but over time, Anna became a living testament to God's patience and grace. With each vase she created, Anna reminded herself that life didn't need to be perfect to be meaningful. After all, even cracks could be filled with the love and purpose of the potter. And you, have you ever felt like a vase in the middle of the process? Have you feared the fire or the cracks that appeared along your journey? Share with us how God has been shaping your life, even through the toughest situations. Let's learn together to trust the potter and embrace the fact that he is working on every detail of our story. This is the channel, Stories That Embrace. Stay with God, and we'll see you in the next story.